Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidhyagena yopankarotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stube patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam katra sutrasya bhashyasya kramat vivaranasya cha. Now, welcome back all of you after the long interval. I shall try to recapitulate and give a summary of all that we have discussed during the last several sessions. First, we must remember we are dealing with a text written by Patanjali. It is in the form of 195 pithy statements, small, short statements, which are not always in the form of a full sentence. The topic of discussion is liberation, spiritual liberation, through sublimation of what we think, what we do, how we act. In fact, how to find out our true identity. This is the abstract philosophical analysis. From a purely empirical, practical point of view, it is an attempt to solve all problems that we are facing in our everyday life. Not external problems, internal problems. Problems of mind. Problems that are unavoidable when we live in this world, engage in different activities. So, that is the topic in the form of a text which is divided into 4 sections, 4 chapters, altogether consisting of 195 pithy statements. These statements are called Sutras, so Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Sutra means a small statement, very short statement. It could be maybe a few letters, as you find in many of the sutras of the Vyakarana, Panini's Ashtadhyayi Sutras. It could be in the form of one full sentence, or it could be in the form of a phrase, like that. So, the first chapter in the available popular published books deals with samadhi, means the highest concentration. The second part deals with the means for the samadhi. Samadhi is called samadhi pada, means that first chapter dealing with samadhi. The second chapter dealing with the means, the methods, the practices by which we attain this state of samadhi, this state of internal equilibrium, internal harmony, internal peace, when we achieve a feeling of inner fulfillment, inner peace and harmony within ourselves, which also reflects in our interaction with other people. Samadhipada. The third chapter deals with Vibhudipada. Vibhudi means certain internal mental faculties, powers, different capacities that we develop in the process of practicing different disciplines for achieving samadhi, this highest internal fulfillment. The last chapter deals with kaivalya, means liberation. Now, this is the structure of the book. Now, we are right now dealing with the whole text in a different way. So I have tried to analyze the whole text into a chronological order. That means first we discussed about 15 sutras of Samadhipada, means first chapter in the published book. Because that chapter deals with the definitions of yoga. So yoga chitta vritti nirodha. This is a definition. There is a second sutra, Atha Yoga Anuशासनम. Now we are going to deal with the discussion. We are going to expound the philosophy and psychology of yoga. That is the first sutra in the Samadhipada. And then yoga is defined as yogaha chitta vritti nirodhaha. We all explained, I'm just giving a background of what all we discussed so far to some extent. Now, what is chitta vritti nirodha? In English translation, you find cessation of our identification with the modifications arising in the mind. Something like that you find. It needs a lot of explanation. In fact, sutras can never be really understood. That's why they're having a large number of commentaries on Yoga Sutra. In fact, that first invocation that I chant in the morning, Stuve Patanjalim Vyasam Shankaram Cha Munitrayam Kartru Sutrasya Bhashyasya Kramat Vivaranasya. This is a kind of invocation. We are paying a tribute to the three great masters who have evolved this unique yoga psychology and yoga philosophy, yogic way of life. The first important figure that we remember is Patanjali, the author of these 195 sutras, pity statements. Then the commentator, the commentary, it was written by another great sage. His name was Vyasa. And the third figure is Shankara, because the Shankaracharya wrote an elaborate description of the commentary, a commentary upon the commentary. It's called super commentary. And a commentary written by Vyasa on Patanjali's system. So, in fact, these are only three of the greatest great sages and saints whom we remember. There have been others. Many of the great interpreters and commentators of Patanjali Yoga Sutras have been Buddhist monks, Vijnana Bhikshu, and so on. There have been any number of Bhoja, Vijnana Bhikshu, and any number of great saints have written a number of books. I'm not going to deal with all those subjects we already discussed here, Vajaspati and so on. Now that's about definition. Now, what is the concept of mind in Patanjali Yoga system? That should be kept in mind. We discussed all this. Patanjali's system deals with our mind. As I said, the definition is chitta vritti nirodha, means cessation or stopping of our sense of self, identifying itself with different modifications that arise in our mind. To give an example, when we see or when we experience something unpleasant, we identify ourselves with that unpleasant, that unhappy incident. And this identification causes a lot of problems. Whatever we see for some time, the mental picture of the visual object will be very clear in our mind. When we hear something, the mental picture of something from which that voice is coming, the noise is coming, will be clear to us. So for the time being, our mind naturally assumes the form of the impression that comes to it. Now, when something happy or pleasant, some pleasant experience comes, then we become completely we become completely happy, we become overjoyed. We lose our balance in most cases. Because we get completely swept off our feet when something happy comes, when something unpleasant happens. We also lose our balance when something unhappy, when unpleasant experience occurs. So all these are due to our identification of our own self. Our sense of what we are. With all these emerging waves objects, ideas, and thought currents. Now, suppose we can really understand what we are. When we interpret ourselves to be the mind, then all mental experiences will have a great impact on our mind. When we interpret ourselves to be this body, then even the slightest bodily pain will be a devastating experience. But suppose we realize that we are, our true sense of identity is something that goes beyond the mind, beyond the body, beyond the intellect, something far beyond all this. When we identify ourselves with the transcendental reality that we really are, the transcendental consciousness, then these unpleasant experiences will not have a devastating effect on our mind. We can witness all these, still remain unshaken. We would respond to different situations. We won't become unresponsive or inactive. But even while being engaged in different activities, we will be able to keep our poise, our balance, our equilibrium. This is the topic of discussion, how to achieve this. So, the Patanjali system gives a very interesting analysis of our mental experience. Of course, we should remember, Patanjali's sutras themselves are very brief. But the commentators like Vyasa, Bhoja, Vajaspati Misra, Vijnana Bhikshu, Shankaracharya, and others, they have written elaborate commentaries with great psychological insight. So, according to Patanjali's system, our mental experience is divided into two categories. One, experiences, which is technically called bhoga in the Patanjali system, and our reactions to those experiences. That's all. After all, if you just study our own mind, the workings of our own mind, we have on the one hand an experience, happy or unhappy or maybe indifferent, and then our reaction towards that experience. In the system, that experience is called bhoga, and the reaction is called volitional, emotional reactions of our mind towards these varied experiences, internal and external, is called udvega or vega, means reaction, emotional, volitional responses, reactions to different experiences at the mental level. Now, these reactions are studied from psychological angle. Now, Patanjali says, how do we respond to different experiences? One way of responding, reacting to different experiences is that we get drawn or attracted towards that. If it is something unpleasant, we feel withdrawn from it. We feel detached. If it is something happy or pleasant, then we are drawn towards it. It's called raga in the Sanskrit terminology. These terms are very, very important because we should be very careful if you want to make a deep study of the subject, to keep in mind the particular technical term, because when they are translated into any other language, very often the translation may not do full justice to the technical term, the vocabulary that is used in this system. So the word raga, for example, has got a great connotation from the etymological point of view of the particular word. Its root is like Latin and Greek, It has, all these words are coming from a particular Sanskrit root. So one way of responding, reacting to these experiences is we get drawn, we get attracted towards those experiences. That way we are trapped. So when something happy and pleasant happens, we completely get drawn towards it. So our sense of self gets itself identified with these happy, pleasant experiences. Now that is a source of trouble. Because in this empirical world, which is subject to changes, no experience can remain pleasant in a state of happiness for a long time. Because it's subject to change. Money comes, it goes. Reputation, status, health, all these things, they come, they vanish. So, naturally, every experience of being drawn towards something is a prelude to its opposite. When that experience which are apparently attractive changes its nature, then dvesha means unhappiness, hatred, hostility comes. Attraction and its opposite. Attachment and its opposite. Happiness and its opposite. So this is one common experience for all people in the world. In fact, one reason for all kinds of anxieties, all kinds of depressions is that for some time we expect that this happy state of affairs will be everlasting, will stay forever, will be always in a permanent state of happiness and joy, which is impossible. So, when we forget that, what happens? We identify ourselves with this happy state of affairs. If we can stop identifying ourselves with these waves, which are like they are like waves rising in the ocean, because waves are never permanent. They keep changing. They go up, they come down. High tide and low tide. So all these that is called mental experiences are like waves in an ocean. So if we can stop identifying ourselves with the happy, the pleasant, then we can avoid the problem of confronting the unhappy, the unpleasant. So raga and dvesha, the pleasant and the unpleasant, the experience of being drawn towards something and the experience of being withdrawn from that, automatically we keep away from certain things. The third there's a third way of reacting to certain things. It is in a way related, but it is called abhinivesa in this Sanskrit terminology, means fear, to bhaya, means fear. We are not drawn towards it. And we are certainly not going in favor of it. But we withdraw ourselves from it out of a sense of fear, sense of, we want to avoid certain things. It is not hostility. So these are the three ways of mind reacting to different experiences, mind's emotional, volitional reactions to experiences. Now, to understand this, we have to understand the nature of this mind based on its waves, its modifications. Now, according to Patanjali's system, Patanjali commentators rather, because Patanjali himself doesn't mention many of these terms which I used. They are used only in the commentaries written in Sanskrit. different commentary. Mostly Vyasa, Bhoja and others. There are all these commentaries are being translated into English. Different translations are available. Now, to understand this emotional, volitional reactions of the mind, to understand our mental world, Patanjali system gives a very detailed analysis of how our mind works. In short, depending upon the waves, the vrittis, we call it vritti. Now, vritti is a modification. See, whatever we do, it creates a modification in our mind. We do something happy or unhappy, good or bad. Any conscious effort. That action doesn't come to an end with the production of the result. That action produces some impact in the mind of the doer. Otherwise, there will be no psychological problems. The man won't be different from a machine. The subject, the doer, the person who does different things undergoes transformation. Every action has an impact in the mind of the doer. So that should be understood very clearly. Now, there are 5 states of the functioning of human mind. Kshiptam, Mudham, Vikshiptam, Ekagram, Niruddham. These are the 5 technical terms I shall explain in detail. The first step is, according to Patanjali's system, is called Kshiptam. In a way, it is a state of total restlessness of human mind. When we are not able to do anything, mind restlessly moving without any inclination towards any kind of concentration, any kind of knowledge, any kind of action. Of course, this state is not common, but it is always better to understand this state, because maybe for some moments, maybe sometimes even for hours, we may undergo these experiences. When these experiences become chronic and a problem, then of course, then only it's called a illness. Otherwise, we go through some of these experiences. So, but it's better to understand the working of the human mind. The first step is Kshiptam. This Kshiptam state is a state of total restlessness. When the mind has no inclination, mind is totally incapable of going towards concentrating on any higher topic. So there is a commentator who says, Vajaspati, Sadaiva Rajasa Teshu Vishayeshu Kshipyamanam Atyantam Asthiram. Asthiram means unsteady. Unsteadiness, total lack of steadiness. Mind rushing from one subject to another subject. One idea to another idea. Of course, I should repeat this idea, this point again and again. We have to keep in mind. You find in these commentaries some very interesting detailed description of certain psychiatric problems. Because with so much insight, many of these commentators have given some flashlights, some insights into problems like, manic depressive psychosis, and in some cases, extreme sense of melancholia. All these are mentioned here. But Patanjali system is not an analysis of psychiatric problems, remember, but the system throws a searchlight into many of the problems, as you find in the writings of Jung and Adler. Especially Jung had referred to Patanjali's system as a great work on human mind, which gives many insights into some of the problems. Many of the problems is modern psychiatrists could not probably explain. Okay, that's a different matter. Now, The reason why Patanjali mentions this, very often this restlessness creates problems in our everyday life. So once we understand this, we can avoid this. So maybe for some moments, everyone goes through this state of restlessness. And why? Because suddenly we identify with an experience which causes restlessness in the mind. Once we stop identifying ourselves with that experience which causes restlessness, which makes us restless, then we will be able to avoid this problem. We will be able to remain in a state of perpetual mental steadiness. So that's why it is called asthiram, it means a state of unsteadiness. I have already explained this in the previous sessions. So I'm just giving a bird view of some of the points we discussed earlier. The second state of chittam or mind stuff is called mudham. Now, it is a state of complete passivity created by strong, depressed conflicts of intense passion. It's again, you find in some cases of melancholia, complete passivity, inaction. Your mind loses its energy. That's why, prabala ragadi mohavashaya chittasya mudhavastha sa mudha bhumi means because of or due to the interplay of powerful emotions within the mind, creating conflicts, causing a kind of internal passivity. It is not a state of restfulness. It is a terrible state of complete restlessness. But that restlessness is not apparently expressed, not visible, but it is deeply suppressed. All days, Patanjali will tell you, are not only problems in our everyday life, but are there serious problems in spiritual life. So there are two ways of looking at these ideas. One, in a way, it becomes a great practical help in our everyday emotional mental life to be aware of these problems, because once we are aware of problems, then there are no more problems for you. In acute chronic cases, I'm not talking about that in its advanced case of psychiatrical problems, it is a problem. But in normal human life, when we become aware of some of these intricate workings of human mind, then these problems are no more problems. We can remain in a state of perfect steadiness. If you read Buddha's life, Jataka's tales, you find when Buddha meditated for long years, a number of images and impressions and memories flashed through his mind. All these images were rooted in his past life, hundreds of past lives. But he could not be shaken by any of these, the temptations of past life. So he became Buddha. That's the description here. So the second state of the mind stuff, chittam, is called mudham, is a kind of complete passivity, inaction. Due to conflicting desires, which are equally strong, each neutralizing the other. You become mentally and physically incapable of doing anything. The mudha state. The third state that's very important, vikshiptam. It's like the pendulum of a clock moving from one end to the other. It is always preoccupied with different things. But then it is not able to concentrate on anything. It is able to concentrate for some time, but immediately that concentration is disturbed and then it goes in the opposite direction. Many of our problems in everyday life are rooted in this. One great commentator, Shankaracharya, and he called it Shankar, that is Vyasa Bhashi Vivaranam it is called. He makes a statement. What is the practical benefit of understanding this state of human mind? It's called Vikshipta state, the third state. When we are preoccupied with something, the mind becomes concentrated once on one subject for a while, and then the mind moves in the opposite direction. So, you have a sincere desire to acquire a higher level of concentration, but the mind remains incapable of being fully concentrated on one point or in one area of work for a long time. It is able to concentrate. So most of the spiritual seekers belong to this category. It is able to concentrate for a while, not for a long time. So this is called the Vikshipta state. The fourth state is called Ekagram. It is a state in which the mind remains fixed on the object of meditation without a break. This Ekagra state can be analyzed from two angles. From a purely spiritual angle of a yogi. A yogi will remain concentrated on his spiritual ideal for a long time without any break. And it becomes a kind of asamprajnata samadhi, sometimes called, similar to that. It is a kind of a prelude to the highest samadhi experience. Concentration becomes acute, full. There is another state to this kind of concentration. The great geniuses, the men and women who have accomplished great things in this world, great artists, great inventors, again inventors of a previous era when scientists had to remain mentally preoccupied with their ideas and thoughts for all time because they couldn't store data in a computer and come back again, forget for a long time and come back again. They couldn't do that. So great philosophers and mystics, great artists and painters of ancient times could accomplish great things because they had developed a very high power of mental concentration. The same concentration, when it is practiced for spiritual liberation, it takes you to a higher level of spiritual perfection. This is Ekagra state. The fourth one is called Niruddha state. When the mind is completely free from all vrittis. All vrittis are being restrained in the mind. So it is called asamprajnata samadhi. So these are the 5 states of human mind according to Patanjali's system, his method of analysis. Now, we already discussed certain topics in the earlier sessions. You may remember all this, how we practice Kriya Yoga, Tapaswadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhanani, etc. In the process, we discussed one very important subject. That's a unique theory, a psychological theory of Patanjali's system. That is called, it is a theory jointly developed by Patanjali and Vyasa. It is called a theory of karmashaya. What is karmashaya? It's a very interesting discovery of Patanjali's system. Now, I already mentioned earlier that this mind deals with different problems, different images, etc. And also how mind reacts to different experiences, how we ourselves react to our mental experiences. Already mentioned, raga means intense attraction, and its opposite, withdrawal, and bhaya means fear. Now, when these experiences become very subtle, they will produce a kind of internal mental samskara which continues to exist throughout the cycle of our existence. Of course, when I deal with this subject, I must mention again, Patanjali's system totally accepts two fundamental principles of Oriental or Indian religious tradition. One is the doctrine of karma, the other one is the doctrine of rebirth. So that should be understood. The whole of Patanjali's system accepts these two fundamental doctrines, the doctrine of karma and the doctrine of rebirth. Whatever we do produces a modification in the mind. That modification becomes an intense potency. It creates a strong tendency to continue that action or to avoid that action. If the experience is unpleasant, then it creates that experience, or the action which produces that experience produces or creates a vritti or a tendency or a samskara which will make us avoid that same action. If the action produces a pleasant, happy experience, then we have a strong tendency to repeat that action. So karma, vritti, samskara. Samskara is a strong tendency oriented towards action. Samskara produces characteristics, vasanas. You find, how do we explain the multiplicity and diversity and plurality of human tendencies and impressions? As I said, on many occasions, the same family, same environment, 5 children, 5 different characteristics, which cannot be explained except in the light of rebirth. So rebirth is taken for granted in Patanjali system. That should be understood very clearly. So karma produces a modification. Modification produces a tendency. A tendency becomes a characteristic, and characteristic again prompts you to repeat or avoid an action, and that again produces the same modifications. This kind of cycle that continues. In the process, 2 types of impacts, effects are produced. Merit or demerit. It's called punya and papa, which decide our future life. So, in this context, Patanjali brings out this klesha theory. It's called klesha. I already mentioned. Klesha are obstructions, obstacles, problems that we encounter in our life as a general, especially in spiritual life. Avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, klesha. We already discussed 3 of them earlier. Extreme attachment, extreme aversion and fear, that's called raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, are rooted in a sense of ego, but because we identify ourselves, individually we identify ourselves with the experiences that we go through. And this again is rooted in one fundamental problem. That's a problem. The problem is we interpret ourselves to be something other than what we really are. In reality, we are the consciousness. In Patanjali, it's called Purusha. We are the Atman. We are the all-pervading reality. But We misinterpret ourselves to be a mind that goes through these changeable experiences. We interpret ourselves to be an intellect. We interpret ourselves to be the body and so on. So these create a kind of subtle and strong residue, strong samskara, which will produce result not only in this life, in the next life. So Patanjali's system is based upon this. One, karma is modifications, vrittis, samskaras, vasana, sankalpa. Because when you have a strong tendency, then you take a decision. You have willpower to do certain things, and that leads to certain actions that again produces results. So this wheel is going on. Once we understand this, we can come out of this wheel and we can remain in a state of perfect steadiness, equilibrium, and mental balance, mental poise in the midst of diverse experiences, good or bad. Now we will have interaction. Perhaps this session needs a little longer interaction, so I'm stopping now. And we were discussing with one fundamental topic here, that is dukkha chadurvyuha. We just started in the last class, that when we finished on June the 5th, it was the last class now. So now we will have interaction. So you can discuss, you can ask questions, we will discuss. And if you do not have any questions, then I will continue from where we left in the last session. Okay. You can discuss anything. Vikshipta and Ekagra. That is third and fourth, yes.
So Vikshita is more around, like you said, most of us, right? Pendulum. We can concentrate spiritually for some point of time, but not for a longer period. And then in Ekanta, you give the example of the older philosophers, spiritual seekers.
Ekagra state. Yes. Now, the Patanjali system itself throws some light on this subject. I mean, how to evolve from a vikshipta state, a state of pendulum moving from one end of the clock to the other end, towards a state of higher level of concentration for a long time. So one method is, we have a tendency to get concentrated on certain things in which we have a natural interest. So, see, Vikshipta state deals with this subject. You are able to concentrate on certain things for some time, but again after that your mind goes after some other topic which may be totally different. It means you are interested in X and also you are interested in Y. Y may not be a desirable thing. X may be a desirable thing. So one way to do it is to sublimate the focus of concentration by sublimating the desire. To have a higher desire. I gave the example of the great geniuses. You come across, in early times, you come across philosophers and even scientists, physicists, mathematicians, who didn't care for anything. They didn't have to worry about recognition, attending a scientific conference, or maybe the fear of being excommunicated from the medical fraternities or scientific community, nothing of the kind. You see great men like Newton, Copernicus, Einstein, or Varahamihira, Bhaskara, many of them, they didn't have to worry about those things. So they could sublimate their mind, the desire to a much higher level, which goes far beyond the physical, the emotional, the mental. The same power of concentration, when practiced in spiritual life, it helps you to reach the level of asamprajnata samadhi, kind of higher mental concentration. So to sublimate, to refine our desire. That's one thing. Conflict of desires is one very common cause for conflicts in concentration. So one method is to sublimate, to refine our point of focus, our desire, our ideal of life to a higher level. That's one way to do that. Many do that. Sometimes you find such examples, but they may not do it consciously as a spiritual practice. They do that, taking up some higher ideal. But frequently, it becomes a profession. It doesn't relate to everyday life. That's the main reason for conflict, So conflict always means the existence of conflicting or mutually contradictory ideas or ideals in life. So that's why to totally sublimate our focus to a higher level. That's one way to do that. Then it naturally becomes ekagra. To have a high ideal in life, noble, and then willingness to focus our whole mental energy, time, everything on that. In the midst of other responsibilities, you may be a teacher, you may be a professor, you may whatever may be your job. Along with that, there should be higher. It is not in conflict with our everyday responsibilities or everyday life experiences. One can elevate oneself by sublimating our desire. Ideas. That's one way to do it.
That sublimation, I can't imagine any other form of sublimation except that sublimation of who you are. Who am I? Sublimation. Ultimately, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm the subject, I'm that which is behind the mind. The only form of sublimation I can think of.
That's the ultimate method. That's the ultimate way. But to begin with, for those who cannot raise themselves to a higher interpretation of their own individual self, they may have a higher goal to achieve. Because when you have a higher goal to achieve and when you put all your energy and time towards that, you grow in stage. We grow when we put our whole energy and time, everything on a higher ideal. That takes us away. At one point, suddenly we are forced to realize, well, I'm not just this physical body. After all, if you are just a physical body, why should we practice morality, ethics, good things? If you are just physical bodies, why should we accept the law enforcement agency? Because there are many wonderful men and women in the world who do good things, left to themselves, without any fear, without any compulsion. So because they are slowly evolving, elevating, they're sublimating their own definition of what they themselves are. But ultimately we have to raise our own definition of what we are to a higher level that goes beyond the bodily, mental, intellectual things. Even when we take interest in these things, for example, any interest in higher metaphysics, higher ideas, which practically are of not much use in purely empirical terms, we are actually elevating ourselves. There is such a thing as consciousness. There is such a thing as higher mind. there are these problems which we should raise ourselves beyond all this. So that's the beginning. Finally, you find many great men and great women and sages, not only sages, many great men, who could sit back and watch the whole drama of their own life and life in general and remain unaffected by the vagaries of destiny, fate. And all. So, oh yes. Please.
So that is one of the conditions, and that is one solution.
Yeah.
How about the other conditions? They all have that same solution?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the other earlier stages. So, the first state is a state of total restlessness. That's called kshipta state, total restlessness. Such people generally evolve, but then they are not able to. They are not able to focus their mind on anything because of their total restlessness. Generally, in spiritual tradition, this restlessness is both mental and physical. So one way to reduce mental restlessness is to give some good, useful, healthy physical involvement. The work therapy and all that in modern psychiatry is being used. Engagement, keep the person engaged in something. That's what exactly is. So from a state of total restlessness, which is a state of exuberant energy, manifesting different forms, that person may evolve to a higher state when that exuberance of physical mental energy is diverted towards healthy, useful channels. Because any healthy diversion is a way to sublimation. Any healthy, useful channel. So restlessness can be reduced. So people, you find in normal life, such people can do great things physically all the time. Any good action. They may not be able to do mental action because it requires a higher level of mental poise. So, but physical action is possible even for the most restless types of people. But that takes the person to a higher level of mental refinement. So the same principle applies here also. In other states also. Yes.
And the next one?
Oh, from kshipta state to vikshipta state. Kshipta state, is a passivity state. You become completely lethargic, inactive, state of passivity. But there, it's not restless, but it is not engaged any useful creative work. So the next state is to do something creative, good. But such a person may not remain engaged in any creative work for a long time. Again the mind goes the opposite direction. So from kshipta he evolves to vikshipta state. Which is like a pendulum. Many people who belong to the vikshipta state, they gradually, when they grow older, you find they evolve. I've seen people who engage themselves in a lot of philanthropical activities, not for their own good, for social responsibilities, doing good things for others. At one stage of life, slowly they evolve a philosophical attitude towards life as a whole. Remember, Patanjali is analyzing a truth, but it doesn't depend upon Patanjali's system. It is human mind, it's a natural law which Patanjali analyzes. So there is an internal evolving mechanism that is at work. Any person who engages in some kind of good activity will evolve. And if that activity continues at a vikshipta state, it naturally evolves to a higher state of concentration. That's why you find people who are being, even in areas totally detached from conventional forms of spirituality or religion. In normal secular life, people who accomplished a lot as captains of industry, businessmen, of course following some fundamental principles of dharma and ethics. When they reach a very high level of achievement, they start turning their mind towards higher values, which we may call spiritual, religious, or anything. So this happens even to people who may not be conventional believers in God or religion or anything. I'm giving an example from a totally different area. But of course, for those who are conventional believers and practitioners of spirituality, this happens quickly and fast, because they will be able to identify their experiences with all these great ideas. So it becomes quick. That happens.
Swami, you mentioned some Sanskrit terms which you should know technically. Could you repeat those Sanskrit terms and also suggest where we get their technical understanding? I'm familiar a little bit with
Yeah.
Williams, and he'll take a Sanskrit term of
Yeah.
16 or 5 or 6 or 18 different translations in English. How does one actually come to understand these roots?
Yeah, no, we can make use of these translations, but along with that, if you can attend discussions like this, and if you can ask questions what exactly the term means, and then when you read, you'll be able to make out what the translators really mean. Because no translation can do full justice to any original work. It is a principle in language, linguistics. Translations can never be as good as the original. But in these Sanskrit terms, like raga, dvesha, all these terms, they have evolved a lot of intricate implications which we can only explain in elaborate discussions, classes, not in books. But books are certainly useful. Books are certainly useful. Because once you read books, or more than one translations, you get more or less a clear understanding. But having done that, if you ask questions, then it becomes very clear. For example, raga, you find aversion is the translation normally given. Sorry, yeah, it's not raga, dvesha. Dvesha is translated as aversion. Raga is attachment. The word raga is translated as attachment, and dvesha is translated as aversion. True. Now, attachment and aversion in English language has got certain meanings and implications. But raga goes far beyond that. Attachment could be, in a purely empirical sense, you get attached to something. Raga here means you mentally identify yourself with something and then consider that thing as happy, as something that gives you permanent happiness, that will make you happy forever, and then get drawn towards that. It's almost like a chain that binds you. That's what raga or attachment is. Dvesha also be a kind of aversion, a hostile feeling without any real cause. You just feel a strong aversion towards certain things, which also creates in your mind waves of anger, hostility, which again remains the mind, which colors your mind, your thinking, influences your thinking, which haunts you all through. That is called dvesha. A haunting hatred or aversion is dvesha. And raga is something that binds you, that gets you trapped into that. So the word attachment may not always imply all these intricate meanings. But it is natural. Anyone who reads a number of translations will understand. Again, in the context, you get all these meanings. When you read the whole text, if you read only that portion, you may not get the whole meaning. But if you read more than once, and if you read other related portions, the implication becomes obvious.
So there's an element of delusion in this attachment and aversion. I mean, there's self-deception. I mean,
Yeah.
you're not thinking clearly. I mean,
That's true. Yeah, true. That is true. Very often it may not be realistic based on reality. That's again. So see, for example, in the commentators you find people who have a strong, irrational hatred or aversion to certain things may have a reason for it, because they had some experience that goes beyond this life. It's called phobia or things like that. So and it's opposite also, attachment also. So happens like that. Please remember, we cannot live without translation, without depending upon translations. But it's in a detailed discussion like this, it's better to remember that. The inadequacy of any translation, as a matter of fact, it is an accepted principle in linguistics. That's true. So we'll continue the class in the next session. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.